Okay, we are going to be looking at converting numbers today and reviewing how we use our measurement skills to go from whole and fractional numbers to a different unit. Quick review of our basic steps. When we go from a big unit to a smaller unit, we're going to multiply. And we go from a smaller unit to a bigger unit, we're going to divide. And if we're getting confused on which operation is which, I like to think about feet as my example. So 2 feet equals how many inches? I just know that it's 24 inches. I know the conversion factor is 12 inches is 1 foot, so I know 2 feet is 24 inches. And I can backwards think a little bit and say, well, to get 24 inches, I really did 2 times 12, because I know 2 times 12 is 24. So I just went from a big unit to a smaller unit, and I multiplied. So big unit to small is always going to be multiplication. So now we're going to practice. 7 feet equals how many inches? Well, we just talked about the conversion factor is 12 inches are in 1 foot. So 7 times 12, because feet are bigger than inches, is going to give me the answer of 84 inches. If you had to do 12 times 7 off to the side, that's completely fine. 12 is a basic fact we should know, but we might have to do it this way, and we'll still get the same answer, 84. It won't always be a whole number we're trying to convert, though. We're building up to be able to do mixed numbers. So if it's 7.5 feet equals how many inches? We're going to follow the exact same steps. We already know the conversion factor, 12 inches in a foot. We already know feet are bigger than inches. So I know my problem is going to be 7.5 times 12 is going to give me my answer in inches. But this is when I stop and I have to rethink a little bit, because 7.5 is what we call a mixed number, and we don't multiply mixed numbers. We have to convert our mixed number into an improper fraction. So 7.1/2, I need to think about how I can rewrite this. Well, 2 times 7 is 14, plus 1 is going to give me 15 halves, and I'm going to times that by 12. Now it's much more doable. We literally learned this in lesson 1 and 2 of this module. So it's going to be 15 times 12 over 2. I see I can simplify here, 2 and 12. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 12 divided by 2 is 6. So I get 15 times 6. 15 times 6 gives me 90. So 7.5 feet equals 90 inches. We took our mixed number, we converted it to an improper fraction, and then we continued our conversions. These were both going from big to small, so we were multiplying. When we have units that go from smaller cups to larger pints, small to big, I'm going to divide. I know that there are 2 cups in every pint, so my conversion factor is 2, and I'm going to divide. 16 divided by 2 gives me 8 pints. Sometimes it will go in evenly, and that's fine. If we have 17 cups, let's say, equals how many pints? Conversion factor remains the same. I'm still going to divide. So now it's going to be 17 divided by 2. Well, this isn't a perfect fact. I don't have a whole number for this, and that's fine. I'm just going to write it as a fraction. 17 divided by 2 is the same thing as saying 17 halves, because the division sign is equal to a fraction bar. I can go back and forth. So now I have 17 halves, and I can think about turning that into a more simplified fraction. I can take 8 2s out of 17, because that gives me 16, and I'm left over with a half. So I have 8.5 pints is equal to 17 cups. Now, we also talked about going from a smaller unit to a bigger unit and dividing with a fraction. So let's say instead of having 17 cups, we have 16 2/3 cups. The conversion factor is still 2. There are 2 cups in every pint. I'm still going from a small unit to a big unit, so I'm going to divide. So the equation would be 16 2/3 divided by 2, and that will give me my answer. I have some problems with this, though, that I need to stop and readdress. I have a mixed number. We just talked about how we do not work with mixed numbers. We need to turn it into an improper fraction. So 16 2/3, I have to multiply 3 times 16 and then add 2 to figure out my improper fraction. So I get 48 plus 2 is 50. So I get 50/3 now divided by 2. But I stop again because I do not like to divide a fraction by a whole number. We don't like to divide fractions. It doesn't work well. So instead of thinking about division, I know I can take that divided by 2 and turn it into a times by 1/2. So my problem can actually be 50/3 times 1/2. Divided by 2 equals times by 1/2. They're the exact same thing. So now I can just do this straight across. 50 times 1 is 50. 3 times 2 is 6. You might have simplified first. That's fine too. I end up with 56 as an improper fraction. I want to turn that into at least a simplified fraction here. So I'm going to do 50 divided by 6 is going to be 8, with 2 as my remainder. So we get 8 2/6, or 8 1/3. So 8 1/3 pints. So review of the basics. Big to small is multiply. Small to big is divide. Right, you figure out your conversion factor. When you see a fraction that's a mixed number, make sure you turn it into an improper fraction before you do any kind of operation, whether it be multiplication or division. It should always be put as an improper fraction. And if you are doing that with division, where it's an improper fraction and division, so it's combining both of our exceptions, we need to stop and think, well, I cannot divide by a fraction. I cannot divide a fraction. So I'm going to flip that division into a multiplication and view it that way instead, because divided by 2 is the same thing as timesing by 1/2. As long as we're following the steps, identifying the conversion factor, looking if it's bigger or smaller to know what kind of operation I'm going to do, you're going to get it right every single time. The only thing that we might make errors on is our multiplication or division when we're having to do bigger numbers. But that's something that the more we practice it, the better we'll get. So just remember to slow down and follow the steps every single time you do a conversion problem, and don't try to do it in your head.